Ruth Joanne Bader was born on March 15, 1933 in Brooklyn, New York. She graduated first in her class at Cornell University and later studied at Harvard, where she became the first female member of Harvard Law Review. Ginsburg taught at Rigas and at Columbia, where she became the school's first female tenure professor. In 1972, Ginsburg co-founded the Women's Rights Project at the ACLU, where as chief litigator she argued 6 landmark gender equality cases before the US Supreme Court. But the question is, why did she fight for equal rights? Her whole life she came in contact with sexism just because she was a woman. At the time she wanted to work as a lawyer, the life of a woman wasn't as much worth as the life of a man, and the same applies to their work. Ginsburg was ready to change something about that, so she studied the law more intense than ever to find disputes. And as you can think, she found them. On her first case, Frontier versus Richardson, the main question was, if a federal law requires different qualifications criteria for male and female military spousal dependency, unconstitutionally discriminate against women, thereby violating the Fifth Amendment's due process clause? And the answer was yes. The court said that dissimilar treatment for men and women who are similarly situated violating the due process clause and the equal protection requirements that clause implied. In order to that, Justice William J. Brennan Jr. applied a strict standard of review to the sex-based classification as it would to racial classification. As so, the government's interest in administrative convenience could not justify discriminatory practices. In the case Khan versus Chevin, the question was if the Florida statute that only provides property tax exemptions to widows violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And the answer was no. According to the Supreme Court, face single women significantly more hardship in the job market than single men, and the disparity is particularly true for surviving spouses. While widowers can generally continue in the job market for the first time or after an extended absence. Based on that, the court held that the gender classification in the Florida statute was a fair and substantial relation to the legislation's proposed of softening the financial impact of the loss of a spouse. In 1975, Ginsburg had the case Weinberger versus Wiesenfeld, with the main question if the gender-based distinction in Social Security benefits violate the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment. And the answer was yes. The Supreme Court held that the purpose of the Social Security benefits for the surviving spousee and children is to enable the surviving spousee to properly care for the children, regardless of the gender of the parent. Again, Ginsburg made a big step against gender-based classification. In 1977, Ginsburg had a similar case. The main question was if the gender-based requirements for survivors' benefits in Section 402 violate the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment. The answer was also yes. Justice William J. Brennan Jr. described this situation as indistinguishable from the one in Weinberger versus Wiesenfeld, where a similar statute was invalidated. The court rejected the generalizations that a wife is more likely to be dependent on a husband than a husband on his wife. This was definitely a big step against the old notions of gender roles. Her last case was Duran versus Missouri in 1978. In this case, the main question was if Jackson County's practice of automatically accepting women from jury duty on request violate the 6th and 14th Amendment guarantees to a trial by a jury chosen from a fair cross-section of the community? Yes, it does. The Supreme Court held that during statistical evidence sufficiently proved that Jackson County's jury selection process violated his constitutional rights. Durant showed an underrepresented distinctive group resulting from Jackson County's practice of exempting women. Also, there was no significant state interest to justify exempting women from jury service. To make their decision, they used a combination of the Due Process Clause and Equal Protection Clause. But did the change of the law really change the world? Ginsburg was definitely really important for equal rights and gender equality. She helped every young woman and man in the United States to be who they want to be and to practice what they want to practice. But as you can see, people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg can't change everything. Ginsburg helped the law and the world to move a step forward, but that step wasn't enough. Every generation needs someone like Ruth, someone who understands the law, sees what's wrong with it, and wants to change it. But the change of the law does not mean that the people will change. Women in the US and all around the world are still discriminated for their clothes, behavior, or work. Most of the times they did not even get equal pay. And the same, even worse, is when it comes to the skin color. Even though there is no slavery and Afro-Americans have the same rights, somehow they don't apply for them the same way as for white Americans. And because of that, the fight for equal rights did not end with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It has just begun.